Hi, I'm Sharon from Lilabelle Lane Creations and welcome to episode 3 of my mini series titled English Paper Piecing Back to Basics. In today's episode we're going to have a look at fussy cutting. I'm going to concentrate on my Prudence pattern because it is great for beginners, intermediate and experienced EPPers. For lack of a better word. This pattern works on a repeat of 4, so it is a great scrap busting quilt. I must admit, while I am piecing my 2 Galaxy quilts as part of the Sew Along a Block of the Month, I am actually going to, from the scraps that my fussy cutting leaves from that project, I'm going to be cutting more pieces out to expand this project. So a little bit about Prudence. This is my second version of my Prudence quilt. It's made out of Chula Pink fabrics, obviously, if you can have a closer look there. Now, I finished this quilt to the level that you see on the cover. I appliqued my black borders, and just as I was about to send it to the quilter, I decided no, I needed to stop. I wanted it bigger. I had so much fun making this quilt that I sat there and I reverse stitched I obviously took the photo for the cover, and then I reverse stitched and removed my border. So currently my quilt, if I can bring it over, is here. It's folded, it's waiting for more blocks. I've got a pile of blocks just here that I've been slowly making, and like I said, during my Galaxy journey I'm going to be adding more blocks to this pile to make this quilt a lot bigger. So if we look at this quilt, it's made of 2 blocks, the bloom block and the cross block. So this block is great for highlight fussy cutting. So in each square I have highlight fussy cut a bird, and then because I was highlight fussy cutting those, I've gone through and cut these out from the leftover fabric between the holes to make the utmost use of this printer fabric. These blocks are the fun ones. We've got the 4 house shape pieces in the middle which come together, and you can play with some great effects. There's a kaleidoscope effect. You get to play with colour as well. You can get so many cool effects. Yes, let's open it. Let's have a quick look. You can see you can get some pretty awesome looking blocks. So we've, like I said, we've got the house block in the middle, which you can kaleidoscope fussy cut, whether it's a symmetrical design or a non-symmetrical design, that's up to you. And then we've got the 2 outside blocks. We've got these 4 here, which is a highlight fussy cut. And then these, you can see on this one, it's not even fussy cut. I've just had a tiny little bit of scrap of this yellow fabric. So I've traced out my 4 blocks and added it in there. Or you can, let's see if I can open it a bit further. Here we go. We've got a kaleidoscope fussy cut in the center of this one. We've got 4 highlight blocks there, and then I've got 4 highlight fussy cutting here as well. So let's take a closer look at the fussy cutting, and everything's falling out of place. Okay, so to get you started, let's move this out of the way. You're obviously going in each pattern, so in this case, if you're looking for it, it's Prudence. This is, get a little bit distracted here. This is a cute pin cushion I've made from fussy cutting as well. So it's just 6-point diamonds and hexagons and diamonds on the back. So it doesn't have to be big projects with fussy cutting. You can do little projects as well. Okay, so to get you started, you need a sandpaper board. You might need a mirror. Some people work great with a mirror. Some people don't need it. I tend to not use the mirror for this particular project. Your scissors, pencil, glue pen, fabric, and your templates. Now the great thing about these templates, I have, you're going to be able to see that on there, you will when I lift it up. Let me try and give you a look. Can you see that I've added in these templates center registration lines? So this makes it easier if you're centering a print to fussy cut. So you've got your center registration line there on this one as well. And then this one's got the cross center registration. So if you've got a mod on the fabric that you want to center, that just helps you get it in the middle. So again, this is probably a better version than what I did in the last video. You can see your dotted lines. So your dotted lines, everything inside that is what your paper is. Let me grab a paper that corresponds. So you'll see that that paper sits in, and everything outside of that is your seam allowance. I don't know if you've also noticed, which is great now, all Lilabelle Lane English paper piecing papers are no longer laser cut. Remember the laser cut, you can still get them in other kits, other designers, do I say. Let's bring this back up. See the burnt edges on it, and they can leave a little grit when you open the package and whatnot. Ours are no longer laser cut, so there's no burnt edges on them. So that's a great little bit too. Okay, so we've got our templates, we've got our pen, we've got our glue, we've got our scissors, we've got our mirror, we've got our sandpaper board. We need to look at fabric. When it comes to choosing fabric to fussy cut, you need to learn how to see a repeat on a fabric. Now, like I said, the Prudence block works on a repeat of 4. This one here is really easy to see the repeat. So basically the repeat, you can see how many. So you wouldn't need a lot of this fabric to come along and play with for a repeat of 4. So you can see, yeah. Okay, another great print that I've just pulled out of my scrap baskets for fussy cutting is this one. So again, it's easy to find your repeats. So super easy to see your repeats of 4. So what we can do, the Prudence kit also comes with a fussy cutting viewer of the house. So if you remember, the house is the shape in the center of the block. So these 2 sides here are the ones they're going to touch. So we can have a look on a symmetrical print at what happens when we want a fussy cut. So what you do is you lay your fussy cutting viewer on your fabric, and then you get your fussy cutting mirror and you lay it on top. Okay, I am going to cut in with the video and show you the effect from here, so you can see all your different fussy cutting options on this fabric. So as you can see, there was so many different options for that fabric and the fussy cutting. Today though, we're going to have a look, because my Prudence quilt is made from Tulip Pink fabrics, I'm going to play with some Tulip Pink. And because Tiny Beasts has just landed in store, and I got my hands on some this week, we're going to have a play. So this one, again, is a great print to fussy cut to get your kaleidoscope effect. You can see your repeats in this fabric are quite close and condensed in together. So it makes a great one to fussy cut and do the centres from, or not just the centres, you can do any part of this block. So fussy cutting, we've worked out the repeats of our fabric. Now we need to look at what element of the fabric we want to fussy cut. So we're going to get our fussy cutting viewer and our mirror. We're going to lay our mirror on top. We're going to position it over our fabric, and we're going to slide it around and take a look at all the different fussy cutting options we have available to us, and we're going to select one and we're going to fussy cut it. Okay, so you've just seen how many different fussy cutting options are available from this one print. So now I'm going to pick any one of those and fussy cut some elements for you so you can see how to do it. So I've got my sandpaper board. The sandpaper board has the grit on it, which is going to grip our paper. So I'm just going to lay the appropriate section over my sandpaper board, and my fabric won't move. Now I'm going to get the center template, the house template, my pencil, make sure my lead's out, and I'm going to lay it over an element. So I'm going to use my center line. I like to always, the etch side I have face down on my fabric, so it's a close reference against my fabric. So I'm going to look at what options we have available. So first off, I'm going to cut this red flower. Now when you lay your template down to fussy cut, to make it easier for yourself, look for a reference mark that's going to make it super easy to duplicate on the other 3 cuts. So I'm going for this flower. This is the element that I want to cut. Now I'm looking down, I've got 2 green bits that roll in here at the bottom. These bits here. I'm going to place part of my template in this purple bit in the hole, because that's going to be easy for me in my mind to work out where to put the next one. So this is where I've got my hole in the middle of that green bit. So we've got, and I'm just looking at what's going to butt. So this bit on these 2 lines are going to butt up against each other when I sew. So I'm looking at it going, I could take it down a bit lower. I've got these red bits coming in. If I took it down a little bit lower, yep, that would be great. This is going to give me some movement of the lines, because you imagine where this bit is here, it's going to duplicate over here. But I'm going to lose my flowers, so I need to make the decision what I want to do. I want to keep my flowers. So I'm going to go back up to this dot here at the green. I'm going to center my circle, make sure I've got my flowers, hold my template with my pencil. I am just going to twist my pencil in my 5 reference holes. That's going to give me a guide later on, once I've cut it out, where to rest my papers to glue baste. So then I'm just going to trace my shape. One done. I don't know if that's showing up too well for you, but believe me, there's a pencil line that you can see. So I'm going to go over to my next one, and I can see, because I put the dot of my pencil, I know where my hole needs to go for the next one. So I've lined the hole up, I've got it right, and I'm just going to repeat the process again. So I just need to do this 4 times. And I'm going to move across my fabric. So I'm just going to reposition. Again, my hole's supposed to be in the green bit. Just checking, yes, we're going under the green. I nearly positioned it above the green. So this is why we've also got that reference hole mark. So I can go back and go, yep, I want underneath. Make sure it's in the right spot. Mark my reference holes for my papers. Trace my shape. As I said, the great bit about this pattern is it's only a repeat of 4, so it's really quick to do. Okay, so that's all I need to do for that shape. While I'm here, I'm going to look at shape B, which is this shape. And I might cut a couple of those out as well, or trace a couple of those. Now, what I'm looking at here, I can see that I've got space between the top of these blocks I've just traced here before I get to the selvage on my fabric. So that is going to work perfectly. Can you see what I've done there? I'm going to have none of my selvage holes in the bit of fabric that's going to show on the outside of my pieced block, and I can butt it right up against this piece here. So I can get 2 different fussy cuts within that small piece of fabric there. So I'm going to use the center line that I've given you on the template, butt this up against the drawn line here, center the, what is it, a bear? And I'm going to trace that one. And now I need to go and do that 4 times as well. So this is super easy, because I'm just putting my template on the drawn line from the previous block, centering the line of the template straight up the bear's nose, marking my reference holes for my papers. So if you were a hand piecer, you would do this same process, mark these holes for your piecing, and then you would come along with a pencil and obviously a shape that's longer than this, and you could draw from dot to dot, and that's going to give you your hand piecing lines. So English paper piecing papers with templates that have reference holes in them can be great for hand pieces as well. So again, we're just repeating the process. We're centering, we're marking holes, going all the way around, and our last one, butting it on that line of that previous house shape we've drawn. Now, I don't know how well the pencil's showing up on the video screen for you because of the lighting, etc. But yeah, it is clear. Oh, just broke my lead. That happens because we have to have the lead out far enough that it's going to extend beyond the width of the template. And we want it to get into those holes. So you can see pretty quickly, I've got my shape, what do we call it? My shape B. I'll put the templates here so you can see. So I've got my shape B and I've got my shape C. So the other shape that I've got to play with is my shape D for my blocks. So my shape D is this piece up here. So I could, oh, look at that. I could go, all the bees, is that bee, oh, what is it? It's a hive. So we could go in and we could fussy cut some hives. I'm not going to, you could get really carried away. You can just keep cutting. So the next bit that you need to do is to cut your pieces out. Now I could quite easily cut into the edge from these, which will work because I'm right on the edge, but I want you to get into the habit of is actually cutting in and creating holes in your fabric. Now okay, let me try and word this properly. Can you see that there? So what I want you to get into the habit of doing is actually cutting on the drawn line. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold the fabric, my fingers under there like pushing the fabric between my scissors, remove it, snip it. And then what we're going to do is cut along the drawn line of the fabric. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so by doing this, what we're actually achieving, there's one piece cut. I need to go and repeat that for all of them. So what I've done is created like a Swiss cheese effect on my fabric. I have this nice hole in my fabric. Now, the reason we cut out on the line and not use a rotary cutter is because my next fussy cut, if I wanted, I can go right up to that piece and I'm not losing any of my fabric because I've used a rotary cutter and fussy cut beyond. There's no way with a rotary cutter that you can cut along a seam and stop dead at the end of the template. You're always going to go that little bit further, and that potentially will run into the seam allowance or the piece for your next fussy cut you want to do. So always cut out like Swiss cheese, and then I can go up because I've got nothing, no cuts going into any part of that fabric around there. So I can butt my next fussy cut if I wanted right up against any side of my pieces. Just a handy little trick. So I'm going to go cut these pieces out and I'll be back with you. Okay, so with my scissors, you can see that I've come in and I've cut the 4 pieces that we traced. So we've got the 4 house pieces, which are up here. So that was this cool fussy cut. And then I've done the 4 bare faces. So you can see if you imagine I hadn't done the 4 bare faces, if I go in and cut them out on the drawn line, I still maintain the integrity of the fabric surrounding those fussy cuts. So if I hadn't cut my bare faces, this would have been a full piece of fabric that I could have come back at a later date and used and manipulated and potentially cut the bare faces out of. So that's the fussy cutting. That's a very basic fussy cutting that's going to achieve us a fun kaleidoscope effect in the center of our block, and then for another block we've got the fun bare faces. Another way of fussy cutting is to do a highlight fussy cut, which is pretty much what that one was, but let's show it on a simpler piece of paper. So this is the fabric that I'm using for my cross blocks in my quilt. So to show you how I'm achieving that with minimal waste. Now I could, because I don't necessarily need my reference lines or reference dots from my template marked on this fabric, I can actually trace it on the right side of the fabric. If you were doing the reference dots to place your papers, like we did for this one, you wouldn't trace it on the right side of your fabric because your dots are going to be on the right side of your fabric, which is good as useless to you when you want to baste from the back. Okay, but because I'm not going to worry about dot placement on this fabric, I can trace from the front. But with that said, it's still handy to work from the back of your fabric, because if I make a mistake and trace something, and then not necessarily with this fabric, I trace some, say I needed a repeat of 6 or 8, and I've looked at my fabric, yep, I've got enough to do it, and then I start tracing and I find out I've only got 5 of the 6 pieces I needed. If I've traced on the front, I've then got to go back and try and remove those pencil lines from the front of my fabric. So it's always a good habit to work from the back of your fabric. So with that said, I'm going to flip it back again and we are going to work from the back of my fabric. Okay, so with my cross blocks, like I showed you in my original quilt, I was using the birds as my center. So I'm just going to come in, I'm going to trace a couple of birds, try and get them as close as I possibly can to each other. I'm going to lose a bird occasionally, that's just given, that's the nature of fussy cutting. So as you can see, I can pretty much get 3. I'm going to lose him. And then we just trace him. I'm going to come back in and trace. So I start off by going through and tracing a few birds to start with. That'll do to start with. Then I'm going to come back with this and I'm going to fill in. Now I could do, there's not a lot of colour on that, and I'm not being super frugal with my fabric. So I'm going to come back to where I'm going to get more colour burst. And I'm just going to start tracing other bits. I don't want the bird. I could look at that. Yeah, look, I'm going to cut another. And in the grand scheme with this quilt, you do need to make sure that you have 4 house pieces for every bird. So you don't want to go super silly and trace every bird and come back and realise you can't get the 4 house pieces. Let's go over here. So you can see I'm just looking to nest in. Might actually go, so if I went this way, I'm only going to get 2 of the blue bits with a lot of background. If I went that way, what I was looking at, I'm still only going to get the 2 pieces. So I'm actually going to go this way so I get more blue on my block. So I've got the 2 and then the 3rd one added in by going there. I'm not going to worry about cutting the excess out. That's just wasting my time. So you'll see, I don't know if you can see, my template finishes here and a few millimeters later is the next piece. So I'm just going to cut that one a fraction bigger. So we go up here. I don't want the bird in because I'm eliminating birds on my house pieces. And I just start tracing. And then once I've done this for a while, I will just sit there with the scissors and hand cut out what I want. Also with these pieces, I'm trying to, oops. That didn't work. I'm trying to keep with the grain of the fabric. I don't want any bias cuts. Well, I don't need any bias cuts on these. When fussy cutting, you can end up with a lot of bias cuts on your work, which is great. We can still work with them, but you just need to be super careful when you're handling your finished work that you support the weight of your quilt so that you don't stretch. So you can see I'm just playing. I could potentially, oh, let's do it. Let's not waste fabric. It's going to have a lot of background. It doesn't really matter which way I go. I'm going to get a lot of background, but hey, that's just me being fussy. So you do what works for you. So that's how I work those pieces in, and I'll just go in with the scissors. And again, when I come to the edge, I'm just going to cut around the edge of these. I'm not going to do any big square cuts and waste fabric. So you'll cut those out for the cross blocks. Clear as mud? Have I scared you off yet? I hope not. Okay, so let's come down. We're going to concentrate on these 4 blocks. So what we want, papers. Let's bring in my tray of papers. Let's clean up some mess here. Okay, so we're going to flip these over. Now this is how I work. I flip, whether it's these 4 pieces or I'm doing 6-point diamonds or I'm doing 8-point diamonds. I always lay all 4, 6 or 8 pieces out wrong side up ready to baste. Then I will come along and I will drop the paper pieces on top for every single one. So I'm ready to go. And come along with my glue pen, bring it forward, I'll lift it up, I'll look for, let me move it up a little bit, pick up my paper. I'm going to look, you see my marks? It's a bit hard to see at a distance, but believe me, they're there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to position my paper on that bottom point and make sure it sits square, and I'm just going to baste. So one swipe over, rotate. Same as what I showed you in video 2. We want to maintain nice tight points and straight sides. We want to eliminate any excess fabric at our points because things are just not going to come together neatly. So see how we've got a nice sharp point all the way around? So our other 3 are going to come off here and make our effect. So let's baste our others. Paper up. I'm lining it on the bottom dot that we drew from the template, and then we're swiping. Remember to hold our glue pen like a pen. See how I'm getting the pointed edge? That shows me that I'm using the glue pen correctly. If that's flat on the end, I'm doing too much of the straight down dab glue motion, and that's going to put too much glue on my papers and make it hard for me to get the papers out later on. So work around, pushing nice and tight over those points. Remember, we don't want excess fabric. Okay. Again, we're going to line it up with the dot at the bottom that I drew. Make sure it's centre between the 2 dots at the top. And then work our way around. Again, remembering we're keeping a gap between the edge of the glue and the edge of our papers. This comes into effect, like I said previously, when we come to sew our shapes together. With the glue not being right at the edge, we're eliminating any potential gunk that our needles are going to go through. Again, working around. Now, like you've seen me do today, I've cut this shape and I've cut my bear shape. I tend to do that when I'm going through my scraps and I'm making this quilt. I will look at what space I've got left and I will just cut a whole heap of shapes. I have them here. I had them here somewhere. I don't know what I've done with them. Anyway, I have a whole heap of loose. I'm going to always put the lid on your glue pen. Otherwise, it's going to dry out and it's going to gunk up and you're going to just, here we go. I'm coming back, I promise. This is what I do. I tend, when I'm going through my odd pieces, like, you know, I had a scrap of fabric of that, so I've cut 4. So once I've got a collection of shapes, I will then start picking my pieces and joining my blocks. There you can see there's a bit of a selection there, and I will add my bears into it. And I've got some here that I've cut that I haven't got to basting yet. So if we look at this one, that's a highlight fussy cut for the centre. That proves not every centre has to be kaleidoscope fussy cut, or, you know, for the centres. We've highlighted some prawns. Obviously I had a day where the fruit fabric was in front of me because I've got 3 different shapes of the fruit. So you can see I've got the centre and the 2 sides cut from the fruit. We've got the rainbows, we've got birds, And we've got more there. So I will get a collection of these, and then I will sit down and I will select what combos go together to make a block. So you can see the different prints, the different combinations that can go together. So it's fun. It's mixing up colours and prints. Right, new chula, old chula, cats, cups of tea. We've got parts of octopuses. This one is 4 cats coming together in the centre. So really it's a fun project to play with. Here's a fun kaleidoscope centre. So you can see this is busy here, but then it just fades out. It's not as busy. This one is fun. So this is a non-symmetrical print that's giving the movement in the centre of our block. This one here is totally different too, because all I've done at the centre here is I've made sure that a spine of the flower comes into the centre, thus creating the movement as we work around the block. It's another one and another one. Okay, so back to these. I'm going to show you how to sew these together. So let's move all of this out of the way. There to play with another day. So this is what we're playing with. We bring them together. This is the effect we're going to get. So you can see if I can zoom you in a little bit. I can, but it's all going. So that's the effect that we're going to get. So now we need to sew them together. I need my thimble and I need a new rubber bit for the outside. If you're not sure what I've got here, go back to video episode 1 and it will show you. So what I've got is my thimble. I put my thimble over my finger and I've got my new rubber one and I'm just going to slide in because this is brand new. It's going to be tight and it's going to take me a sec to get it just right. These are also great because if you've got long nails, in camera shot, Sharon, you got long nails, then you can just take this bit out and it allows your nails to breathe. Okay, so I've got, let's go up a bit further. Okay, I have my thimble exactly where I want it on my finger, so I don't put my needle through my finger. I'll be right back. I've just got to go find my needles. Okay, found my needles, found my clover thread dome. Again, if you don't know what this is, go and have a look at episode 1 in this mini series. I have 2 pre-threaded needles still in here, so all I'm going to do is pull one out and we're ready to go. So I always knot the end of my thread. There's fancy stitches you can do, but I don't. I just twist it around my finger, roll it and pull it and create a knot. I'm just going to move that out of the way so it doesn't get stuck on my jumper. So what we're going to do, we're going to sew 2 halves together and then we're going to do, so 2 halves, these 2 are going to be sewn together, these 2 are going to be sewn together, and then we're going to come and sew that together for the center. So all we do is lay our 2 pieces face to face and line them up. Now a little trick, and I don't know if I can get, yes I can, dropped my needle, hang on. Can you see this, what I'm looking at across here? When you are kaleidoscope fussy cutting and you want centers that look awesome, where is the block I had for you earlier? These won't, the block I had earlier won't work. Okay, let's pull out this one. That's probably not gonna, let me try and find, okay. This one would work. When we're joining, we want to try and join our floats. We look at the side, this one even. See how we've got a kaleidoscope center? When we go to sew these together, we want the orange and the pink bits to match. So when we sew this piece together, we kind of want these blue lines of the fabric to join as close as possible to achieve the effect we're after. So when we fold and we place our pieces right sides together, look at the seam that you're going to be sewing and what you're aiming to do. Can you see where my needle is? Is that showing up? My phone in focus. You want to make sure that that bit's sewn together, that line there's sewn together. There's a faint blue line at the other side of the aqua that we want to sew together. If we can try and get these sewn as close together as possible, like we don't want them, you know, hypothetically moving where nothing matches. We want to match the print from both sides. So what we do, knock the tail out of the way. We come in with our needle. We take the tiniest bite of our fabric. First one I do, I'm going to take it away so it stays in focus. So I've done my first stitch. I'm going to go back in the same spot. If you're putting your needle through and you're getting resistance, you're hitting your papers, take it out. Do not sew through your papers. That's going to make it really hard to get your papers out later on. Pull the second one through and I continue till I've got a little loop left in my thread. Then I will put my needle through it and I will wrap it around my needle. Can you see that? Wrapped it around my needle 2 to 3 times and then I pull it. So what I've done and what I call this is securing your thread. It's making your first stitch on your piece nice and secure and held tightly together. And then we just start working our way across. So as you're sewing and taking the tiny bites of fabric, you want to sew the shortest path possible, and that is straight across. We don't want to be sewing on angles. We want to go straight across and keep working across. Now the thread I'm using, this block is predominantly purple. I'm using colour, where's my camera? 655. So it's the creamy off-white. I find it blends with almost any colour. So we're working our way across. If you were working on like a 2-inch piece, I would probably do that locking of my stitch a couple of times across it. It just keeps your thread taut, holds it nice tight, stops it from gaping open. Okay, and we work all the way to the end. We want to go right to the corner. So I do 1 stitch, I come back with my second stitch in the same spot. Can you see on my finger I've got a tiny loop of thread? I will go in 1, 2, do it 2 or 3 times so the thread's wrapped around my needle and I secure my stitch. And whenever I'm finishing and I'm about to cut my thread, because at the start I have a knot which is helping it not come undone, at the end I like to do the securing of my stitch twice. 1, 2, 3, secure my stitch, cut my thread, open my piece, and there we go. So then we need to do the next one. So again, we are finding the end of my thread. Just form a little loop, I twist it in my fingers, I pull it, I have a tiny knot. We come back again, we're going to do them face to face. We're going to look at it and hope that some of our lines match up. So we've got a blue line there. So I could start at either end, it really doesn't matter, it's just a personal choice. So right at the very tip of the work, I'm taking my first stitch, going back in pretty close to the same hole, second stitch, leaving a loop, wrapping it around 2 or 3 times, pulling it, and it secures my stitch. And then I'm going to start working across the piece again. You don't need super tiny stitches. It's not a competition as to who can get the most stitches in an inch. Never actually counted how many stitches I do. So again, like I said before, if this was a long piece, I would get, you know, halfway, an inch in or so, and I would secure my stitch again. So it'd be a loop, wrap it 2 to 3 times, secure my stitch. So that just keeps, in between each time you've secured your stitch, it keeps your thread nice and taut. And then you just continue on to the end. So as you're joining, you want to make sure, remember that those lines or anything that you've got as reference are lining up. Go right to the end. So my last stitch is right at the edge of my pieces. So I'm going to take my stitch, I'm going to go back in the same spot, leave a little loop, wrap it 2 to 3 times on my needle, pull it, secured my thread. Because I'm about to cut my thread, I'm going to come back a fraction, little loop, I'm going to do 2 to 3 and done. Snip my thread, open it up, and we've got one done. So now we have our 2 halves and we want to join our 2 halves together. So first thing I need to do is find the end of my thread, loop it around, create my knot, get my 2 halves, lay them right sides together. So this time we want to make sure that our 2 middles are matching. We want them to be as accurate as possible. And again, we're going to look at the sides. We can see we've got 2 blue bits here we want to match in lines. We've got lines here that are matching up, and we've got a line here that matches up. So the closer we can get to getting them to match up as we sew, the better our finished effect will be on our block. But our most important, as we sew, we don't want our pieces slipping side to side. Now you can use a binding clip. I have a binding clip. If you're new to this, you can put a binding clip butt up at the end so that you know that won't slide that way. Some people will use those magnets. I personally don't like them. For me, they're too strong of a grip, and I have a fear that one of my pugs is actually going to get hold of it and swallow it and need an operation. Ask me how I know, because Ali has eaten applique pins before and required a stomach operation, so I just don't put those magnets in my house. Okay, so we're going to start first stitch right at the corner, second stitch, loop around 2-3 times, secured my stitch. I keep working across. Now if you get to, I'll go up a little bit further, if you get to a section where you want to match the lines on your seams here and they're not quite matching, you can manipulate them a little bit. Now, is this in focus? Can you see that my line is ever so fractional out? I could do a better example where it's way out. That is the only time that I will go across on an angle and then pull it back to manipulate the fabric to pull back ever so fractionally. And then I'll do another stitch on the other side of it, and I'll secure my stitch to hold that fabric in place. Something that comes with practice, but the more you do it. Now we're coming to the center joining pieces. So I always secure my thread at the center. So I've just done 1 stitch. This is my second stitch. I'm going to wrap my needle around the loop and secure it in place. Knock the tails. This tail here is in my way. I'm going to knock it out of the way. We don't sew tails in. We always knock them out of the way. Come as close as we can to that joint in the center. If we don't, we're going to end up with a hole. So as close as we can, I'll do another 1 stitch. I'll come in with the second, and I will again secure my stitch. That just, oh, and I just broke my thread, which is another reason why we also secure our stitch, because if we pull that little bit too hard and we break our thread, the last time I secured my stitch was right here. So I can just pick up from here and sew again. If none of this was secured, technically I need to go right back here and start sewing again, because we don't want that thread to unravel. So let's just trim off that. I'm actually going to rethread my needle. I'll give you another little tip here. My thread, I've just cut off my spool. Okay, I'm using, let me get in shot, my needle. I'm wrapping the thread over my needle and I'm squeezing, can you see? I'm squeezing the thread between my fingers so it lays sideways, and then I'm taking the tiny eye of my needle to my thread. Squeeze it, tiny eye of the needle to the thread, please go on. And then it goes on. It is so much easier to take your needle to your thread than it is to take your thread to your needle. Okay, we're going to do another. Just realised I don't have my glasses on, which is not helping the situation any either. Okay, so because I secured my thread, I can start straight from where I left off. If I hadn't, like I said, if I hadn't secured, I could pull this and all this that I've just stitched would come unraveled. So imagine if you'd done a 3-inch side hexagon or something and you had to go back and re-sew that whole side. Not what you want to be doing. Okay, so I'm going to fold it back. We're going to go back to the center. We're going to make sure we get both sides of the fabric. Apparently I only want to get one. Okay, one. So we're at the start again. loop, wrap 2 to 3 times. Secure my stitch. And work your way along. So again, we've got blue bits. They line up nicely on the side this time. So we're just going to keep sewing over them. Now, something you're also going to want to try and teach yourself not to do, the hand that's holding your work, you don't need to be giving it a death grip. That's where the binding clips can also come in handy if you need them to hold in any section, to learn to try and relax your hand. If you don't learn to relax your hand, you're going to get pains in your hand, and there is no need to give it a death grip. I don't use binding clips because I guess I've just done it so long that I no longer need them. But yeah, the binding clips are there and they are your friend. So we're just going to stitch along till we get to the end, and then we're going to secure our stitch and cut our thread. Okay, because I'm going to cut my thread, remember I come back a fraction and I secure my stitch. Again, needle stuck to my scissors. I'm going to cut it, and then we're going to open it, and we're going to admire the center. So you can see it's not perfect by any means, but if anybody's going to get that close on this particular section of my quilt and have a problem with that, we need to remember it's their problem, not yours, okay? So that's my center. Then we're just a matter of finding the next bit. So here's some of the shapes I was playing with before. That's what I mean. It's handy to have them. Why do I only have 3? Okay, so I must have another piece in my pile somewhere. I just don't know where. Oh, here it is. Okay, let's do it so you can see it. So if you have a pile of these pre-basted pieces, you can come along and start building a block. So if I was to construct this block, I would make centers, then I would come in and sew these bits, and then I would come back and sew my edge bits. I'm just wondering if I have any edge bits. Yeah, some of the weirdest combinations work for this quilt. It doesn't have to be matchy. Okay, so we could pull in a green if we wanted for something totally different, adding some spots, or we could go, I kind of like that. Gives it the pop of yellow because the 2 purples are really dark. It gives it a pop of yellow. So when I'm sitting down for this quilt and I'm doing a fussy cutting session, I will sit and make a heap of these blocks, and I'll lay them out on my table, and I'll come back and I'll pair up. And if I'm happy with this block, I will then just gather my pieces, get them all lined up neat with each other because Sharon's a little bit crazy like that. Get my binding clip. That's held together. That's a unit. That's going to be a block. This can then go into my sewing bag or wherever, in a basket or something, ready to be sewn together one night in front of the TV. So I hope that's informative. Any questions, please ask. Okay, so I think that's it for this one. It's a basic of fussy cutting. I encourage you to play. The more you play with your fussy cutting, the better you will get. The better you'll get at getting your seams, your kaleidoscope seams and that to match. But yeah, so this quilt that I've been playing with, in case you missed it, is called Prudence. It's a super fun one to play with. If you're following along in my Facebook group or with the Galaxy Sew Along and Galaxy Block of the Month, you will see random blocks appear as I make holey fabric while cutting my Galaxy quilt. I'll be using that fabric to make more of these blocks to grow that project. Thank you.